Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Great Movie Ride podcast. This week we'll be looking at Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I am your host, Gaston, joined by my co-host, Jerryofdom, and we are joined by our special guest star, Iron.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning.
And in case we don't see you, Truman Show.
Oh, I haven't watched it in forever.
It's a good movie. But not what we're talking about today, as we're already off the rails, off the track a little bit here. Yeah, a little bit. So let's dive straight into Shang-Chi and the Legend of Ten Rings with our pre-viewing thoughts. Now, some of us saw the movie the first time very recently, Nick, and some of us saw it in theaters a few months ago. So, and obviously this wasn't a podcast back then, so it's like, think back for Iron and myself to what we thought before. But Nick, since you're the freshest take on your previewing thoughts, why don't you start us off?
Well, I kind of two previewing thoughts because before the movie actually released in theaters, I just kind of like, I don't know what to expect from this movie. There's a guy with rings and he throws them around. I didn't know too much what was going to happen. And then, the movie came out and everyone's like, it's amazing. It's spectacular, I was like, maybe I have hope for this movie. Everyone makes it seem to be really great and everything. So I walked into it with higher expectations than I would have if I'd seen it when it came out in theaters.
Iron, you'd like to go cover next?
So I had mixed expectations for this movie.
Me too.
Because there was a lot riding on this movie for me. Because this was like the first standalone film since I know technically Spider-Man takes place after Endgame, but this movie I felt was like the start of the next arc.
Yeah.
And my investment with Marvel movies ended after Endgame. Like they got me in, and then my investment was paid out when Endgame happened. So they needed to do something that would make me reinvested in the story. So there was a lot riding on this movie. I wanted excellent kung fu.
Yeah.
Especially seeing the cast and everything. I wanted excellent kung fu. I wanted an interesting, dynamic villain. And I wanted an enjoyable time. And I feel like I got all of those things.
Yeah, more on the villain a bit later, as it will take a lot to shut me up about the villain, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But yeah, just further on what you were saying, Far From Home was technically still part of the Infinity Saga. And then our first looks into Phase 4 was the streaming series and then Black Widow, which took place after Civil War, so it's kind of like, this is a really good first look into the future of the MCU.
And this movie for me was like, okay, are they gonna get me to buy into the next phase, or is it not gonna get me interested? And I felt like, and I wanted to be intrigued, but they had to earn it because they couldn't write off the coattails of the previous arc because that's now done. They couldn't write off that anymore.
And a big chunk of the characters are gone with it.
Oh yeah,
a lot of big holes to fill.
Yeah. And then just for mine, I wasn't planning on seeing it in theaters, but an old buddy of mine and who's appeared in a couple videos on the Gmod Squad channel, Jet, he was coming up to spend the weekend, and he said, hey, why don't we go see it? So we saw it opening weekend, the Sunday after it came out. I felt like I would enjoy the movie, and I was feeling more positive to it than I was for Eternals. If you haven't heard our thoughts on Eternals, go ahead and take a look at the first episode. We talk for a good hour and a half about Eternals. There's a lot to cover with the impact on the MCU is huge, but we'll save that for that video. And then looking at the marketing, a big part of it, even though that wasn't like in the trailers, was that they were going to be redoing the Mandarin. Like, that's something they said from the get-go. They would be doing the actual character, and I was interested by that because while Iron Man 3's Trevor Slattery twist is a good twist, I wasn't a fan of it, if I'm being honest. From the design aspect, the designs of the characters, they all looked good. Nice updates from the comics. And then just because I commented on it in the last episode, I'll comment on this one, there were some review bots for Shang-Chi as well Not as
There
strong as Eternals, but there was some before the movie came out that it was just kind of like, oh, it's falling apart, and Kevin Feige's not happy with it, and it was just out of like nowhere. But same with the Eternals review bombs, I didn't put too much stock into that because if you listen to review bombs, you're just fooling yourself.
You're kinda dumb.
Well, I feel like if a movie's getting downvoted before it comes out and anybody's seen it, then all
just
those
trolls.
reviews are baseless.
Yeah, it's just internet trolls.
That's baseless.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to our plot, light spoilers, quick sum up without getting into too much. So just to establish that the first thing I say is not a spoiler, the trails reveal that Shang-Chi is the son of the warlord, the Mandarin. He is trying to escape his father's shadow and has left him and moved to America. When his father's goons attack him to try and bring him back, he and his best friend Katie travel back to put a stop to his father's machinations as he hunts for a mythical village. And why will be in the heavy spoiler section, is that's pretty much all we can say about the synopsis without giving away too much. Anything you guys think you can add that's not really heavy spoiler?
They fight on a bus.
Well, I saw that in the trailer, so that's technically, that's a nice sequence there.
Yeah, you know, I think they did a great job with their advertising and trailers. That some movies have the problem where the trailers show way too much.
Marvel
That's
usually
what we're
does a
into
good
Spider-Man
job.
at the moment.
I'm not sure if that's the case, but Marvel generally does a good job with their trailers with not.
They do an
revealing
adequate job. They could definitely do worse, but they could definitely do better. And I actually think out of a lot of the MCU movies we've gotten, I actually think Shang-Chi has been the best in terms of getting intrigued by the trailers without it revealing a lot of important information that is a nice surprise to be able to see in theaters.
True. I think back to the Captain America Civil War trailer that revealed Spider-Man.
That was
Like,
such a mistake.
It was a big
was
moment, sure, but yeah, it shouldn't have been in the trailer.
It
Like,
should
could you
not have been in the
imagine
trailer.
if no one knew Spider-Man was going to show up and then he
And
did?
I also think that's why I think they made a mistake in the newest Spider. I
And
don't think they should have revealed
they
any
revealed
information about
all
Green
the
Goblin
trailers.
or Doc Ock or any of them. That should have, especially it being the Doc Ock from another universe.
I'm so excited that Alfred is back, but more on that in a couple weeks as we will be reviewing that movie soon. As soon as we can.
As soon as we can.
Yeah. All right, so let's dive into light spoilers for the main characters. And obviously, we can't talk about Shang-Chi without talking about Shang-Chi, who was played by Simu Liu.
Great actor.
Oh, he was phenomenal. I just want to say that is how you say it. I watched the Disney Plus Assembled so I could make sure I was saying these names as right as I possibly could, because I don't want to mispronounce anything. So
Simu Liu has been a fantastic casting.
Yeah, he was great. He has a nice charisma to him.
Yeah. You know, I was concerned about how they're going to fill Tony Stark and Captain America, especially because the actors that played them were like filled those roles so well, like Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans. Just
they
have this presence. They have this presence when they're on screen. They grab your attention whether you know it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, especially by the end of the movie, like whenever he's on screen, he gets your attention.
Yeah.
Simu Liu has this natural charisma about him that I think could be, I hope in the upcoming movies we see his character try to become one of the leaders of the Avengers, because I feel like
he would be a good one.
I feel like he'd be a good one there.
Yeah. So brief background on the character. Shang-Chi is a skilled martial artist. If you know the comic side, is not a surprise to anybody. He was trained at a young age to be an assassin by his father. He left the Ten Rings organization for a normal life in San Francisco and changed his name to Sean. I grabbed a quote from the director because I thought it was interesting. The director was Daniel Cretton, or Cretan. I think Cretan's probably wrong, but and he described the film as a journey for Shang-Chi to discover his place in the world, and his identity struggles are the core of the character, rather than just his martial arts skills, which is really cool. And then just a side note from the Assembled special on Disney Plus, Liu performed most of his own stunts, which I thought was kind of cool too.
Watching him perform that bus stunt where he
Yeah,
slides off the bus,
yeah.
hanging onto the mirror into the door.
So I think you saw the same special. Yeah, it's really cool.
You could tell that he really wanted this to be a success. You could tell that his heart was into it, and that showed on screen.
Yeah. Nick, would you like to talk about Shang-Chi for a bit? What you thought? Without getting too big into the spoilers.
I really enjoyed his character. He, as we were talking about, as filling the role of Tony Stark in Captain America, he has like the humor of Iron Man, kind of. I noticed, the Tony Stark humor, but he also has that like leadership kind of factors Captain America.
Mm-hmm.
I felt both of those characters were like put into one, while also him still being his own character.
Yeah.
So it felt nice and it felt new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it felt new, but it felt.
It wasn't like
it felt nostalgic at the same time.
Yeah, like it wasn't a jarring thing. It felt good. It
felt natural.
Yeah, and that actually comes down to that charisma that you mentioned earlier.
It did not feel forced.
Yeah, like almost from the word go, you take an instant liking to Shang-Chi, and that's because there's just so much charisma. But as you watch the film, you see more of like the layers, and Liu's performance is so layered and so deep that though he's this charismatic, he's this funny individual, he's also a very complex leading man, and I am super excited to see what's next for the character.
There's two scenes in particular, because I watched it in theaters opening week with Megan, and then I watched it twice this past weekend. There's two scenes in particular that really stands out to me about his acting and just how good, and especially about the depth of Shang-Chi's character.
Not heavy spoilers?
No, because we see it happen in the trailer.
Okay.
We see it happen in the trailer.
All right.
I'll talk about one, because the other one happens later, and we'll get into that in spoilers. It was when he's training with his aunt.
Yeah.
And that whole conversation done not only with words but also with their training, I thought really added a lot of depth to Shang-Chi, to show exactly the internal struggle become an external one.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really well done.
Yeah. My favorite acting scene I can't talk about yet, so stay tuned for heavy spoilers for more on that. Anything anyone else wishes to say about Shang-Chi before we head on to Katie?
No.
All right. So Katie, who is played by Awkwafina. Now, just because I'm not sure, she's a rapper before an actor, right?
I think so?
Because, like, I've seen her recently in quite a few movies, like Jumanji and Raya and the Last Dragon, and now this, and it's just like, she was a rapper.
Yeah, she is definitely a rapper, more crude rapper, but a rapper before.
An actor. Okay. So the brief description on Katie: she's a hotel valet and Shang-Chi's best friend in San Francisco, who is unaware of his past. She's described as relatable and has a real heart and a dedication to Shang-Chi. She is thrust into a world where she doesn't really know what to do and is discovering things about herself as well. Like, a big part of this movie is her journey as well. So let's start with Nick. What did you think of Katie?
Most of it felt like what I felt very relatable, because it was very much like if you threw Nick into the situation that he was thrown into, it'd pretty much be a lot of the same reactions, and just kind of like, yeah, I did that. I don't know how, but I did.
On a dark desert highway.
Yeah.
And in connection with that, like, at first, when I first watched the trailers, my initial thought was that I wasn't gonna like her character. I thought she would be either annoying or that one person that always cracked the jokes, even at the not most appropriate times, and I sort of wrapped her up to just be the comic relief. Now, that doesn't happen And in fact, I would argue that there's even a character that comes later in the movie that is even a bigger comic relief than what Aquafina's character is, Katie. But I find that they did a really good job of making Katie the one that we as the audience follow.
Mm-hmm.
Like like she is us in
Yeah.
this world,
Yeah.
right? And so we're able to believe in the story because of her character.
Yeah.
And I think she did a really good job, especially with all the different scenarios. I thought all the interactions and the reactions to things happening were very realistic for what was happening.
Yeah. Very similar to Karun from Eternals. Go check out that review. Yeah, she is very charming. She's endearing, and while exactly like you said, she's comedy relief character, but she's more than that. Like there's funny parts, but she has got her journey is not front and center because it's not Katie in the Legend of the Ten Rings, but you see her journey of like just kind of finding this focus. I'm not going to go too much more into that, but and it's so relatable to young adults. Like high school is about to graduate, just trying to find your way, and that's Katie's journey. It's very well done, I feel.
Yeah.
Um, that's all I've got for Katie. Would either of you like to share something else?
I don't think until we more get into the more spoiler section.
That's the thing with the character review. It's like you just kind of touch on the stuff, and we'll go back into it more later.
Yeah.
So next up, let's talk about Zeeling, who was portrayed by Menger Zhang. Shang-Chi's estranged sister. I noted that from doing research for all this that this was her first film role, which I thought was interesting. And her character is an amalgamation of several characters from the comics, but particularly inspired by Zheng Bao Yu. And Zhang herself said that Zeeling was vulnerable behind a tough exterior. And that's the basic setup. Let's start with Iron. Cam, what did you think of Zeeling?
I liked her. I liked that they didn't reveal her in the trailers.
Mm-hmm.
The movie started and Shang-Chi's like, I gotta go see my sister, and I'm just like, wait, what? Um, I liked her, but there was still sometimes where I wanted a bit more.
Mm.
I thought in a couple scenes later on, he felt a little flat.
Yeah.
Or maybe just, and maybe it's part of her character of just emotionally stunted, but I never really got an emotional connection, or there wasn't, never to me felt like there was any like huge emotional moments when it came to her character. It was just there for a purpose, and that purpose was, fulfilled in the movie. But I don't know. While I liked her character, I wanted more, and it was because I liked her character that I wanted more.
Mm.
I felt like there was more that they could have done.
I see what you're saying. I am a bit of the opposite point of view. Not much, but I think that she manages to say so much without saying much at all. And the Assemble documentary did have one little thing that I didn't really think about is when she and Shang-Chi are fighting, it's like the sibling fight. And I was kind of like, I rewatched that scene after, and I'm like, you can kind of feel that. But I do 100% agree that I wanted more for sure. She's not utilized to her fullest extent, I would say. Nick?
Didn't have too many impressions on her. It just I wasn't expecting him to have a sister, and the whole I just wasn't personally connected with the character. Not a bad character, but she didn't really do anything for me. It just kind of felt like another character in the story for me.
Yeah, and in that line, I just have a quick question. If she wasn't in the story, would the story have been affected?
No, I don't think so. Not until like the end.
But even then, like not really. Like you could replace her character with another. At least like that's my like, like
she's a good character. But
she's a good character. But for her role of being a daughter in this family, with all the thing being about this family, right? It just feels like
she's there.
Like, would the story have been affected if instead of both of them having a pendant, if he had both?
No, perhaps not, actually. That's a fair point.
The only difference is that we would have a great fight scene in San Francisco again instead of Macau.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But that's it.
That's all I've got for Zeeling. Would either of you have anything else to add?
Again, liked her character. Wish I got more. The writers needed to do more with her.
Yeah, I can see that complaint for sure.
The writers needed to do more with her. She was the one that I walked away from the movie with. Out of like, if you look at the like, because I think there's 6 of them, right? That are like the family. Because you got the mom, dad, the 2 children, and then the aunts. I guess 5, right?
Yeah, it'd be the 5.
The 5 of them. I just needed, like, we got so many good scenes with everybody else except her.
Mm. So, let's talk about Wenwu, portrayed by Tony Leung, Shang-Chi and Zeeling's father and the leader of the Ten Rings organization. Wenwu is an original character for the MCU who replaces Shang-Chi's father from the comics, Fu Manchu, who is described as a problematic character associated with racist stereotypes. And also, Marvel doesn't hold the rights to him, which the fact that they included that in their little like press releases kind of made me think. So if you had the rights, you would have used him, but you just
would
said
you
he was
named him Fu Manchu? Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. It was kind of like that's a weird thing to include. In the film, Wenwu describes himself as having taken on many names, including the Mandarin. He is the real Mandarin, and because of I did extra research into him because you'll find out shortly. I also have noted here that in regards to the Mandarin, the producer Jonathan Schwartz noted that when you use the Mandarin, there's audience expectations due to the comic book history of the character. But Wenwu is more complex than the comics character, and the problematic aspects of the Mandarin's comic portrayal were removed. The director felt that by casting Tony Leung, that he avoided Asian stereotypes and a one-dimensional portrayal by bringing humanity and love to the role. And Wenwu is a fully realized human with relatable reasons for his bad decisions.
Yep.
I want to start and just say that this
it.
is one of the MCU's greatest villains. And I have
it's MCU's greatest villain.
I have a hard time even calling him a villain after watching the movie. Like he's the antagonist, but
yeah,
it's villain?
The MCU's greatest antagonist so far.
He is so good. Like I put him up there with Thanos and Loki. Like he's just
Well, to be fair, you're putting him up with the only other good villains in the MCU.
I like a few others, but those are like the top.
No. You put him up with the only ones that actually have depth.
That's true.
Yeah.
I would argue the Vulture, but definitely lower than the others.
But like, when you look at some of the MCU villains, antagonists, a lot of them fall flat.
That's true, especially the early ones.
Ronan, Malekith. Like those two come to mind real quickly. I would even put Red Skull up there. They just are very one-dimensional. I'm a bad guy. I do bad things, and that's my purpose. Whereas, whereas Wenwu,
relatable reasons for bad decisions.
Oh my goodness, his story was so good, and everything he did had a reason that is not only believable, but like if I was in his shoes, I'd do the same thing.
Yeah, I feel that too. In a film that was filled with strong performances, Tony Leung stands head and shoulders above everyone else, in my opinion. He just commands the screen every time he's on it.
I think his performance was the strongest. I think Shang-Chi's is just below him. Like I think Simu Liu is just below him, especially when it comes to that third act. I think that really personifies just how good those two are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have like it's hard to talk about nothing spoilery
Yeah,
when
we're
it comes
gonna
to him.
dive into him a lot more. Don't worry.
I just love his one line where he's just like he was just like America was afraid of an orange.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that line when he was
Yeah.
mocking the Mandarin title.
Yep.
Yeah, he was so good. Oh, yeah.
Nick, you've been pretty quiet about Mr. Wenwu.
He was, as Cameron said, he always took your attention in the screen, other than Shang-Chi. Both those people, you'd always go to his father. And he had this mysterious side to him where you were never sure what he was gonna do. And I think he's explaining things to him, but you're like, is this really it? Is this all? Is there more? You were never sure. He always puts you on the edge, and you're like, something might happen, but we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like that scene from Macau when you didn't know if they were gonna fight, and then he ends up hugging his son, and I'm just like, yep.
There's so much more depth to even. I'll get into that more in the heavy swords, but even from what the trailers portrayed to what you see in the film, there's like the trailers hid a lot about Wenwu very well.
That's why the trailers were perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it hit about the backstory on their family.
Mm-hmm.
After that scenario happened, and he takes them to that one shop, and it does that. I was like,
more on that later, but yeah, that scene is powerful. I am full blown, just gonna say it. Just like with the Eternals, we say our favorite or least favorite as we get to it. Wenwu is my favorite character from this movie, without question.
My favorite character is tied between Wenwu and Shang-Chi.
Fair.
But my least favorite character,
if we haven't talked about him yet, you don't have to mention him yet.
No, I'm just trying to see if I'll come back to that because
okay.
I'm trying to decide between a couple.
Have we talked about your favorite or least favorite yet, Nick?
It's hard for me, like just from a point of view of not any character stories or anything. Morris was my favorite.
Morris was pretty good.
Actual, like, more in-depth characters, I would have to say it's the father as well.
Yeah, Wenwu
he
stole it. Yeah. I was like, I don't know if that's actually ever been mentioned on Gmod Squad or here, but I actually collect figures from various things that I like. I wasn't planning on getting any Shang-Chi figures. Then I saw the movie. I got Shang-Chi and Wenwu that night. I ordered them from Walmart. He's up there on my shelf right now looking at me.
The reason I really liked him is he gave me the same feeling as when they dealt with Thanos. Was he was telling them exactly what he was gonna do and everything about it, but you're always like, what else? You're always expecting. There's just so much mysteriousness to them, but yet they didn't feel mysterious in that they were all revealed at the same time.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I can find the 10 rings to actually wear wearable accessories. I want that so bad.
But Marvel's definitely starting to pull out the strings of a lot of characters that are villains have more relatable stories, so they're harder hitting.
That's how you build a good antagonist.
Or you make them look like, are they really the villain?
They need to do that if they're ever going to do Doctor Doom. They have to do it right if you're going to do Doctor Doom, because Doctor Doom is definitely one of those villains where he has to be relatable for him to work well. Looking at you, Fan Four Stick.
That movie was a train wreck, but
which one? Because they were all
the one that was the 2015
not the very
one,
first
Fantastic
Fantastic
Four.
Four. Yeah, the one with they recasted with Michael B. Jordan as
they put a 4 instead of the 8, so it's Fan Four Stick. Yeah, that movie was terrible.
That was
when Doctor Doom goes around, just everyone's head starts exploding, and I'm like,
for no reason. There is no depth to Doom at all in that movie. And he's he feels tacked on, and he's the main villain of the movie.
I was so confused.
The main antagonist of like the Fantastic Four.
I know, and he felt like he was just tacked on into the ending, just like, oh yeah, Doom. Anyway, that's what we're reviewing today. Anyone else have anything to say about Wenwu before we move on?
No?
Nope.
Alright, so let's now talk about Ying Li, who is the mother. She was portrayed by Fala Chen. She was a guardian of Talo, the mythical village. And that's pretty much all the notes I have for her. So I think for rotation, Iron, if you would like to, if you have anything to say about Ying Li.
It's tough because we don't see a lot of her,
Yeah.
obviously, because it's mostly just through flashbacks and story.
Yeah.
I liked what I saw on the screen, but again, we don't have a lot of material to go off of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she is the emotional anchor of the movie.
Yes, in more ways than one.
Yeah, she is the emotional anchor of the movie, and she's very important to the story, but that importance is by other characters, not actually her.
Yeah.
Which is, plausible because, yeah, she's only seen in flashbacks.
Yeah.
I thought the times that we saw her were great, but again, it's very limited, so it's tough.
And she doesn't even really speak in the movie.
Yeah, it's tough to say that she did. It's tough to say she's a fantastic character or not because
you don't see
she wasn't there.
There wasn't a lot there. Yeah. But what I saw, I enjoyed. Mm-hmm. It built around the story and amplified the reasons for the people's actions.
Yeah, she gives a decent enough performance for when she's there, and she has some cool choreography, but for all the reasons Kara mentioned, she is my least favorite character. Nothing against her, she's very important to the plot, but without much to do, it's hard to put her above every other character who I consider even considering for least favorite character. Nick?
I don't know
There's
what
not
to
much
say.
To say.
It's one of those things where they introduce something, and I feel like they could definitely elaborate it if they wanted to in an old story or something, like who she was and all that. But yeah, but there's not much to go off of with her.
All right, so let's talk about Razorfest, who is portrayed by Florian Munteanu. He's a member of the Ten Rings, and he has a machete blade for his right hand.
A machete sword, if we're quoting Aquafina, who cut a bus in half.
True.
So
show some more respect.
Yeah.
I think he might be the most reasonable henchman in the entire MCU. For reasons we can't talk about till spoilers, but reasonable at the same time.
Yeah, loyal, but not an idiot.
Yeah, exactly. He's like the most reasonable henchman. So, okay.
Loyal, but not an idiot.
He has cool abilities and a lot of, like the bus sequence you mentioned, a lot of really cool action sequences with him.
Oh, yeah.
But there's not too much else to say about him. If you guys have anything to add,
he's more of just he's more of like a physical opponent rather than an intellectual one.
Oh, yeah.
He's not there to command the screen in the way that Wenwu or Shang-Chi did. But he had really good scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the first and third act. Yeah, first act, third act. Yeah. I feel like that's all there really is to him, though.
Anything you want to add, Nick?
No, there's not too much to add on him.
All right, so now we talk about who we could get a little bit more into. Let's talk about Ying Nan, portrayed by Michelle Yeoh. She is the guardian of Talo, who is the aunt of Shang-Chi and Zeeling. Michelle Yeoh previously was in the MCU as Alita Ogord in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 post-credit scene.
Is this the first time they reused an actress for a different role in the same MCU?
Apparently it's actually happened a fair bit with background characters, but this is pretty much the first one that went so major. Like, until, obviously, Eternals came after, but they reused Minerva from Captain Marvel as Cersei in Eternals. But yeah, this is kind of like the first time where a background character became like a focal point character. And very different. Like, whereas I found Gemma Chan as Cersei mildly distracting because of seeing her as Minerva, This is not distracting at all because she's in literally one post-credit scene when Sylvester Stallone's Takar says, "Let's get the gang back together" or whatever, and she's one of the people there. So this wasn't anywhere near as distracting as that. But Michelle Yeoh, she's phenomenal.
Born for this role.
Oh yeah.
Well, not this role. She's a great actress. Fit really well into the cast.
Oh yeah. Just you mentioned it earlier about the scene training with Shang-Chi is just wow.
Yep.
Nick, anything you want to say?
She didn't have as much of an impact on me. You know,
really?
I think I should probably have like a few more watches to like really affirmate my stand on the character. Like, she's a great character, and I like what she does in the final act. She's good, but she wasn't something that's like, I'm gonna watch this movie because she's in it.
No, she was not.
She's not that for me.
She's not. She's not that type of character in this movie. But I think they did a really good job with her character and Wenwu being polar opposites, because it sort of acted like the yin and the yang for Shang-Chi himself.
Yeah, I see that.
Because Shang-Chi does not have his mother, his aunt sort of takes that role.
Yeah.
Especially during that training sequence, because you could see, like, what I loved about that sequence was when they first started fighting, you could definitely see his father in Shang-Chi. Closed-fisted, very aggressive stance.
Yeah.
And then you had his aunt, who had the same style as his mother, open-palmed, very fluid, not rigid, right? So it's sort of those polar opposites.
Yeah.
And he kind of put them together through
to make his own. Because, and I love that one line in the movie or in the trailer when she was just like, "You are both your father and your mother, or you're both your mother and your father." Like, even though you might not like your father,
you're still part of it.
He's still a part of you,
yeah.
And that's something that you should draw upon, right? I just think of Todoroki from My Hero. Come on, guy. But yeah, it's it's this aspect of she played that, like, the good angel over Wenwu's bad angel.
Kronk's shoulder angel.
The shoulder angel, like, from, I just picture Kronk.
Yeah, Kronk. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you have Wenwu on one shoulder and you have her on the other, and I think she did a really good job.
Yeah. I really liked her action sequence when she fought Death Dealer. Although it wasn't as long as it should have been, but in the final battle when she fights Death Dealer, I thought that was really well done. But I wish it was a bit longer, that scene. Anything anyone else wishes to add?
No.
Alright, let's talk about Trevor Slattery. Ben Kingsley returns. Just a quick recap for anyone who's missed it. Trevor Slattery is an actor who portrayed the Mandarin during Iron Man 3, and was sent to prison, and was abducted by the Ten Rings from the prison, and became a court jester for Wenwu. He has a pet, or I think pet is a little demeaning for this, but a Hundun named Morris, who Nick mentioned earlier.
Yo, Morris is great.
And he goes to Ta Lo with Shang-Chi. So, I want to get Cam's take on this first. What did you think when they brought back Trevor? And the role he played in the film?
I know why they did it.
Oh, yeah.
They did it because they went very hard in trying to fix Iron Man 3. And I think they did an adequate job. I liked his character. Yeah. I liked the humor that he brought. He is a very talented actor.
Oh, Ben Kingsley is phenomenal.
Yeah, Ben Kingsley's a very talented actor. His character, funny, not overbearing, like, not overdone in a lot of places, which they could have easily did with the way that he was portraying his character. And it made sense. Like, story-wise, it made sense. The one part of the story where I'm just like, really? Is like, he's in federal prison, and the Ten Rings break him out of prison to execute him?
Yeah, that's a little weird.
Just to put him back in prison after he makes them laugh. Yeah. Like, that's the one aspect where I was just like, all right.
It's
But
how,
even
how do
he
you get
kind
him
of
into
played
the
it off
movie?
where he's like,
It's like, how do you get him into the movie, right?
Yeah, so it's basically like, how do you get him in to try to like to go over it? But yeah, I was afraid that between him and Aquafina, the emotional moments of the movie won't hit as hard if they resort to too much comedy, because again, it's Marvel.
yeah.
But I thought the comedic timing and just the scenes that he were in, I think he added to the scenes rather than took away from them. So that in that regard, I think that he did it. I liked his character.
Nick, what do you have to say?
I really liked him because of his duo with Morris, and those two just. It was entertaining, but at the same time, it didn't feel out of place because even when you interact with him in Iron Man 3, he's very much like, I'm just acting. I don't know what. They just gave me money. I was like, sure. And he
They
didn't
gave me
realize
more
how much of a
drugs.
problem. Exactly. He didn't realize the problem that he caused. And then Iron Man showed up. He's like, oh, nuts. But then, it was entertaining. And as Cameron said, it didn't feel like overbearing with humor. And it didn't feel like, this is odd. Like, he cracked jokes where it seemed like it would fit in.
Him and Morris playing dead was one of my favorite scenes.
That was hilarious. And also when he's talking about his like backstory on why he
The
started
Planet
acting,
of
he's like,
the Apes, the Planet of the Apes story.
Apes, how did they teach monkeys to act? And then they're like, so you didn't realize that there were just people in monkey suit? I thought they were just monkeys that knew how to act.
No, he still doesn't get that they're people in suits.
He thought they taught monkeys to ride horses.
But they just taught the monkeys to
They just
act
taught monkeys how to act like they were riding horses.
That scene is hysterical. And,
and everybody in the car just looks at each other.
Yeah.
They're all confused.
I am the same. It was going to be a bit risky bringing back Trevor Slattery, but Ben Kingsley, he just nails the part. He sells it so well.
And they've done something with him where he doesn't have to be in it again. But if he made an appearance, it wouldn't be odd. It wouldn't feel out of place because of the way they've left him.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling too that if they did, I think it would be a welcome sight rather than like
I wouldn't mind to see him again. No.
Yeah. I think they did a good job of redeeming his character to be likable and like sort of being like, okay, Iron Man 3, we fixed it there, guys. Okay, bye bye.
The fandom. we need the fan support going into this new untested phase without Captain America and Iron Man. Please forgive us.
Yep.
Yeah.
We need audience goodwill. And the final character we're just gonna mention because we can't talk about him without dealing with heavy spoilers, but he was in the trailer, is Wong. Wong is in the film. It's always a pleasure to see Wong. We can't talk about what he does in the film until heavy spoilers. Anything you guys wish to add?
Wong is Wong, and I love Wong.
It's always
so very
good
much.
to see Wong.
Yeah. Wong was a great sight.
Yeah. All right, let's move.
Before we jump into the next section, there is one person I want to bring up. He wasn't in the movie.
Okay.
But he was the reason why I think the movie did so well, and he was referenced in the credits because unfortunately he passed away before the movie came out, and that's Brad Allen. Now, for those of you that don't know, Brad Allen was the action choreographer for Shang-Chi. So he was the one that developed the fight sequences for the movie. And when you watch this movie, there is a lot of kung fu aspects of this movie that screams Jackie Chan, which is good because Jackie Chan. Well, Brad Allen was part of the Jackie Chan stunt crew for many years. He trained under Jackie Chan. So, unfortunately, he passed away on August 7th before the movie came out in September. But his effect on this movie, it was definitely important. The martial arts was fantastic. Scenes were fantastic, and I really hope that in future Shang-Chi movies, they either get another person from the stunt team to try to do it, to try to make it feel the same, or it's just done really, really well, because that's a big hole to fill.
Yeah. Because those action sequences were good.
Oh,
Like when Shang-Chi was taking off the jacket and putting it back on as part of the fight, like that's Jackie Chan in a nutshell. But that can only be orchestrated because of Brad Allen's choreography and being a part of that for so long. So I hope I have hope that they're able to continue that in the further movies, because if a Shang-Chi movie has bad kung fu,
it won't
that's
be a
going to
good
be a real
movie.
rough time. That'll be a rough time for them. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
And that is a beautiful segue into our effects and cinematography aspect. So let's do cinematography first, as we already started with the kung fu and the choreography for the fights. Absolutely incredible. And especially, I want to give a special shout out to the shot selection during the action sequences. Like, the shot selection is perfect to show you exactly what you need to see every single time that goes into one of those fights, and I think that's absolutely incredible.
What was your favorite fight sequence?
I don't think it's too heavy spoiler if I just say the final fight between Shang-Chi and Wenwu. Just from I don't mean just when they're at the spoiler place. I mean before that too, when they're in Ta Lo, like still in the village. That whole segment, just the shots, the set, and the moves and the action, just and then like seeing the even when Wu is banging on the door and he does like the all onto one arm, just like that's my favorite. Second, the bus. What about you?
Really, my favorite by far in terms of cinematography was Macau.
Macau was pretty.
Macau on the bamboo
Scaffolding.
That whole sequence of using reflections and pan. What was one scene? What is a single shot over cutaways, especially near the end where he's fighting that masked
Death Dealer.
When he's fighting Death Dealer at the very end before Wenwu intervenes. There's like a good 10, 15 seconds non-stop kung fu scene that is one shot, one take. And it reminded me of that one scene in Winter Soldier between the Winter Soldier and Cap with the knife flip. But this scene supplanted that scene as the best one-shot fight scene in the MCU so far for me. That the kung fu, the lighting, the camera work, the setup was just in another dimension.
Yeah, I agree with that. The tracking shots in the Macau sequence, and when a good track shot happens, it's an attention grabber, and there are quite a few excellent shots in Macau that are just the single take tracking shots. What about you, Nick? What's your favorite?
I really like the Macau scene, and I also like when it's the brother and sister sequence
in the
fight ring.
Yeah, because it's like it's him trying to not beat the crap out of his sister, but his sister doing it to him. And as we mentioned before, it feels like the sibling fight.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it still felt like a strong fight.
Oh yeah, because they're both martial artists. Going for it.
Well, she's nicknamed what, the Macau Killer?
Something like that, yeah.
But it was entertaining for me, and I enjoyed that scene.
Yeah.
And then the bus scene is by far my favorite one.
The bus scene is cool.
What's funny is that we each have a different favorite. Yours is the final
fight.
Mine is the intermediary, and Nick's is the beginning.
Yeah.
That just shows how good these fight sequences are.
And each of us will look at the other's favorite, and we're not thinking that why would you pick that? You're like, yeah, that one was also incredible.
All the fight sequences were great.
It just resonates with us differently.
There is one fight sequence that I really, really liked. It's just really, really dark.
I know
it's the flashback to when Wu goes to hunt down.
Yeah, that scene is so good, but we can't talk about it.
Yeah.
Don't worry, it's heavy spoiler, but it's fine. You probably figured it out by
really,
now.
like, the
But yeah,
first,
that
like,
scene is
the first, like, 3 minutes of the movie where it's showing the backstory,
Yep,
Oh yeah.
that was
and they're
great
going
too.
to. That
Even-
Oh
was.
yeah.
Even the fight outside of Ta Lo between the mom and Wenwu was gorgeous. Like it was
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot more
Gorgeous
contained, but it was
cinematography.
gorgeous. Like the cinematography is among the best in the MCU in this film. Like it is
If
beautiful.
they're able to do those effects for a live action Avatar: The Last Airbender, we're fine.
Well, you saw they casted like Iroh and Zhao, right? And they're starting to
Yeah,
film that.
Well, you know that the actor who played the teenager Shang-Chi
Mm-hmm.
is Prince Zuko.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I see
Yeah.
that.
And I'm just like, that's a good choice. This
Yeah.
kid's fit.
Yeah, yeah.
But, like, honestly, when we talk about the cinematography and all that, I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
And I really, out of the first few minutes, I wish they would do like a whole movie on his backstory and like
I
how
would
he
watch
obtained it
that.
to now. I want that.
So my favorite. So this is interesting because it has a lot to do with cinematography, but it's also my favorite scene. And that's when they first arrive in Ta Lo.
Yeah.
And we see the Chinese mythical creatures
And they
for the
are
first time.
really well done.
They are fantastic.
This is where I feel like most of the CGI went to.
And that's
Really?
actually where we transition here to the effects. So let's talk about the effects. The Chinese mythological creatures were gorgeous.
Yeah.
And
The Nine Tails, the Phoenixes, the
Yeah.
Lion Dogs, the
Morrises.
the Morrises.
So for those of you listening that play Genshin Impact, the Chinese horses that Nick just referred to is Ganyu, but in their human form.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's what that is. But I like
that goat milk.
going into a Chinese centric movie, a Chinese cultural movie like Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
You had to do this right.
Yeah, because if you don't, you make a racist.
And all
outcry.
the creatures were just like.
I love the Nine Tails.
Good.
That was
The
beautiful.
Nine Tails are beautiful. I want a lion dog.
Yeah, I think everybody did. Or a
They're
Morris. I'll settle for a Morris.
there is sequences where the effects don't quite hold up.
Yeah, Nick's got one he wants to talk about. I know.
I
got one I want to talk about as well.
There's a couple scenes that immediately like stand out to me when I think about the effects. Most likely due to budget and also COVID, like that has disrupted a large portion of this movie.
Yeah, for sure.
Even though like you see it, I still feel like it doesn't take away from it. Even though you see like, okay, that could have done a little bit better, it still doesn't like take away from the overall movie.
No.
There's just a couple. Yeah.
If you were to view a few effects that are less than perfect and let that affect your impression of the whole movie, like if all the effects, sure, but when it's just a few and they're not major things, like you gotta weigh it accordingly.
So Nick, what scene
before we dive into, I have one more thing that I would like to talk about is the way the rings move with Wenwu. It's not a practical effect, but they nailed it. It looks like a practical effect. Like there's that shot at the beginning of the movie where he first takes him off his wrist and it's like the camera's looking up at it. That looked so good. It's like, oh my gosh. But yes, Nick, go ahead and level your arrow.
I have a real problem with the CGI in this movie, and even the stuff that isn't CGI. I just don't like the camera they used for a lot of the scenes. So it makes a lot of things look fake to me.
I can see that.
There's like scenes where it's like, yeah, this is totally real and everything used in the scene is real, but the camera makes it look out of place. And anytime they started mixing in, like when they first came to Ta Lo and you see them standing there, I'm looking at the image right now because I have the movie in the background to kind of refer to scenes. And the BMW sitting there, and that it does not look good at all. That car looks like it got photoshopped straight in of some grade 5 dragging it in for his slideshow. It just, I have a real problem with a lot of the effects. And
The effect smoothness definitely decreased as the third act progressed.
As they needed to use more.
and I was like even the bus scene, a lot of it looks good, but anytime they start really like doing action sequences where the camera's moving around or there's more objects in the background, I felt it looked like CGI, even if it wasn't.
Whenever, and in relation with the bus scenes, whenever it showed the background moving through the windows of the bus, I just pictured Friends from like the 1990s when they're in the car.
Yeah.
Still love the bus scene.
Oh yeah.
Nick's favorite combat scene, great scene, but some of these small areas where you're just like.
There was one shot in particular. It was an exterior shot of the bus shortly after the back half got cut off, of it like screaming down the hill. That looked so fake to me. It's like, am I watching a Pixar film now? Like, it would look great in a Pixar film, but in a live action film.
Oh, the scene that sticks out of my mind. Okay, about the effects not holding up, was during the flashback of Wenwu, during his rise of power, and it's the scene where the Ten Rings are fighting the Roman army in the forest, and they hit the carriage and the gold spills out. It doesn't look like gold.
It looks like a video game.
It looks like it. To me, it looks like Werther's Originals caramel like card candy.
I can see that.
It did not look like it. It looked like not only was the gold and the carrot CGI, but to me it looked like the people in the scene besides him were CGI.
Yeah.
But I might be wrong on that part. But that, like, a lot of the parts in his flashback really stood out as not being the cleanest CGI, and I think part of that had to do with the budget, and they had this set piece in the third act, which I wish was not in the movie. That I think took the vast majority of their budget, which I wish was not in the movie, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
So, those parts of the movie that could have just been that
I
much
feel
better.
like the story and all the characters and everything were like, if they weren't good, this movie would have gone down because some of the effects definitely are lacking.
But the acting and the people that they had on screen definitely did a very good job of carrying the movie and making us forget about these small things.
One that really sticks out to me is when they first come to, like, after they got introduced and they start showing, like, them Tao and they're walking through, like, the temple area, like, outside of it.
Telling me
and you look at those pillars and the walls and all that, and it's like, so they're walking in a green space right now, obviously, and there's just a bunch of green screens around them.
You mean when they're walking down, like, the corridor and she's recounting the tale of the Tao? Yeah, that was, none of that was built.
All that just looked like, oh boy.
But, to be fair, the woodworking looks fantastic, even though it's CG. It still looks fantastic. The rest...
No.
It was that shot you showed me of the pillars. I'm like, okay, yeah, those pillars don't look good at all.
No, those pillars just are like, what the heck? But I feel like some of the big problems that relate to this is that the camera work would focus mostly on the character themselves.
Yeah.
And then try to drown out the area behind, but it wouldn't, and you could still notice the background, and things would stick out. Because, like, when they're talking to characters in the town and all that, and just the way of the focusing, the background looks fake, even if it wasn't.
You guys ready to move on to writing and score?
Yeah.
All right. The writing is really quite good.
Top notch.
I thought the pacing was phenomenal. The exposition, there's not okay, so there's obviously going to be exposition in any movie. There has to be, or else you'll be lost because you're not living the story. The exposition that's in this film I thought was handled well. There wasn't like this huge sequence where you're like, oh, that was just an entire exposition dump.
Yeah.
The way they chose to do the exposition, like spreading it out through, I thought it was very well done.
The way of doing exposition, especially by means of flashback, where it wasn't always being told it, we got to see it. I think was one of the smartest moves they did. Their smartest move was having the exposition done in Chinese.
Yeah.
Oh,
I agree with that.
That was a fantastic choice.
Yeah.
there were some points where I was very confused on how certain characters just knew English and certain things and all that. Like how they come to Tao Lo and it's like they would probably only speak Chinese there, and then they're like, "No, we speak English." And it's like, huh? How do you?
Make it accessible.
Well, why would they have spoken Chinese? Because it was established in the movie that it's in a different universe, right? So it's
Different
like,
dimension, yeah. Maybe they
no,
should
no.
just speak a
She
different
says
language.
universe.
She does say universe?
She says universe. She says that they were going to try to enter your universe and destroy it too. Because at first I thought maybe it was a different realm, like from Thor. They have the different realms. I thought maybe they were in one of those realms. No, she full on says when they're doing that hallway scene that it's a different universe, and I'm just like, oh, okay, multiverse.
Yeah, already seeing the multiverse all the way through.
I mean, when it comes to that though, it's just convenience for the story to take place.
For sure.
Yeah.
We've talked about the humor. It was much better than most MCU humor. It didn't like. I didn't find a place where humor fell out of place. Did you guys notice one?
No. No, that's what I was afraid of. I was afraid that maybe Aquafina's character or Ben Kingsley character would
like ruin a moment.
Have a negative impact on a certain scene that's supposed to be emotional with humor.
Well, there is one spot where I feel like they didn't need to throw humor in was when they're on the airplane and then the waitress is like, "Oh, we don't have this."
I love that scene.
It was hilarious, but I'm also
I liked that, but
oh,
I could see why you would say it felt out of place, but to me, it's just
I'm not gonna say I don't dislike that scene. It's just like if you were to point out one, I feel like that, but it was super funny and I laughed really hard.
I agree with that. If that scene wasn't in the movie, we wouldn't be like, man, we're missing a funny scene.
No, because it's like him explaining his backstory. It's super serious. Would you like the blah blah blah?
The
We
beef
don't
or
have
the
that.
chicken?
The beef. No, it was the beef or vegetarian because they're out of chicken.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
right.
They asked for the vegetarian. They had no more vegetarian, and then she still looks at them. It's like, well, I guess we're having the beef.
Yeah, beef. And then look at Shang-Chi. Beef.
Beef. But
it was still it didn't feel like, oh boy.
But that comedic timing took you out of the flashback and back into the real world for that immediate exchange to happen after about saying what his real name is and stuff like that. So maybe they used that scene as more of a transition rather than just
like I'm not complaining about it, but like that was one scene.
If you were gonna mention one,
if I was gonna,
maybe I'm just giving them too much credit. That's also equally plausible.
But like there wasn't like the stupid humor in it, where it just is like, okay, why is this here?
The mess of Fat Thor and Endgame.
Yeah.
That was not handled
Make depression
very well.
look like a joke.
Yeah, it wasn't handled overly well. So, the score, I don't have like nothing really stood out to me. The score to me blended perfectly in with every scene, which is actually praise in my opinion. Because if score can build a scene, sure, but it can also mess up a scene if it's not done right. And I feel like
it was an adequate score.
Yeah, it wasn't magnificent, but it wasn't jarring. Like it fit everything just fine. That's pretty much all I've got to say about it.
It wasn't Hans Zimmer's Dune, but it was good.
They're like most Marvel movies. I'm not listening for like their score or their music, but like Avengers Endgame and Infinity War, those scores stuck. Mostly Endgame, because when they used the music, it was very much like showing in your face that this is what's happening, and you remember that music, you know?
Yeah.
But I find most other movies, you're not like, oh, it's that score, that's gonna happen. It's kind of like there's music in the background, but I'm not paying attention to it.
Mm.
You know,
it,
it's like
it, it
the portal's open, everyone knows. You look at the Tobey Maguire movies, when you hear Spider-Man music, you know he's coming. But there's not scenes in Shang-Chi where it's like the music plays, where like stuff's gonna happen. It's
but the music also wasn't out of place. It was
It was perfectly adequate score for a movie. It did its job.
It didn't stick out. It was there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So with all of that being said, let's dive into the heavy spoilers. So, spoiler alert! It's spoiler time. Here we go. Film
just letting
starts-
everybody know it's spoiler time.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to be spoiled, this is the spoiler section. So if you don't want to be spoiled, turn away now.
Exactly.
Everyone dies.
The film starts approximately 1,000 years ago, where it talks about how the Ten Rings give eternal life and tremendous power, and Wenwu discovered them. And it goes through the flashback series, talks about the established Ten Rings organization, which we see in Iron Man. It was pointed out in the Assembled, I never noticed before, but the one guy in Ant-Man had the Ten Rings tattooed on his neck. I didn't notice that. Like, that's interesting.
Yep.
And there's a few other places Ten Rings are mentioned as well in the MCU. They conquer kingdoms, topple governments, and change history. And then in 1996, when Wu was searching for the village of Talos, said to harbor mythical beasts. He travels through an ever-changing forest, which was a really cool sequence. Both times they use it. But is stopped at the entrance of the village by the guardian Ying Li, and they have a beautifully choreographed fight. Anything anyone wishes to say about the introduction?
That was quite the introduction. It really threw you straight to the movie.
And it handled it well. Just like, here we go.
Yeah.
I still want more on the Ten Rings, but I'm sure they're gonna.
Oh, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more on that.
Oh yeah.
The post-credit scene definitely harkens to being more revealed about the Ten Rings. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's talk about where we finally see Shang-Chi. Going by Sean, as we mentioned earlier, he's working as a valet with Katie. Katie doesn't know about his past. They are attacked on a bus, which we've mentioned quite a few times, by the Ten Rings, led by Razorfest, who want to steal the pendant that his mother had given to him. Shang-Chi fights off and takes out most of the attackers on the bus, but Razorfist succeeds in obtaining the pendant and escapes. It is talked about that Shang-Chi had received a letter from his sister that disclosed her location. And Shang-Chi realizes that the Ten Rings will be coming for her half of the pendant and is going to go and meet his sister. And we talked about the airplane scene where he reveals his past to Katie, which is where we see that when Wu turns Shang-Chi into a martial artist and an assassin undergoing brutal training. And this is where we also see this figure, Death Dealer, who's going to be mentioned a few times in heavy spoilers, mostly so I can rag on him at the very end, because he was a big part of the marketing. And then our flashback ends with Shang-Chi at 14 being sent out to assassinate somebody, but he tells Katie he couldn't go through with it. So that covers a big chunk of pretty much the end of Act 1. Fire away if you have anything to add or say to Act 1.
Act One did a good job at introducing a lot of the important characters, introducing the reason for the story to take place, and the vehicle for it to take place. It's there wasn't really much gripe that I had with the first act. I thought it was well paced, solid first act. Definitely built up for bigger reveals in the second and third act.
Yeah.
I honestly think the first act was the strongest act of the movie.
Yeah.
Taken as a whole, I would agree with that.
First act is the strongest. Second act quickly follows, but just falls a little bit. But is a good second act. Third act is the weakest, I feel, of the three.
I'd agree with that.
It's It had a few problems with me, that final act.
But we'll get to
Okay.
when we get to the third act. I'll expand on
Yeah.
those thoughts. But I really liked the first act. First act was it drew you in and was like, okay, yeah, I'm invested for this ride.
Yep, and that's exactly what the job of the first act is. So as Act 2 starts to go around, they arrive in Macau and find that Zeeling has founded an underground fight club. We also learn that she escaped from Wenwu at a young age. This is where we see in the trailer Wong fighting the Abomination, and Tim Routh actually did return to do vocal effects for the Abomination in this film.
Really?
Yeah, I found that out, and I'm like, well, that's interesting. And Abomination is redesigned to be much more comic accurate. Still not perfect, but a lot more accurate than the last time we saw him. It is implied here that Wong is training Emil for something and takes him with him to Kamartaj. More on what I think might be going on there later.
You know what? I want to point out that scene of when he opens the portal and you see the place behind. In the She-Hulk trailer, when we see Professor Hulk looking at that capsule, it looks very much the same.
It could be in Kamartaj. It's possible.
Like, the two places look very much the same. So I feel like they might try to do a team up of like Professor Hulk, She-Hulk, and Abomination or something.
I'm pretty
It's just a
sure
weird
he's supposed to
take
be
because
in it.
Oh,
which is such a weird take because like Abomination is supposed to be like one of the main Hulk antagonists.
Yeah.
Isn't he like second only to the leader as far as Hulk antagonists go?
Yeah, I would definitely have him top 3 along with Red Hulk.
Yeah, Red Hulk, of course, who we've been dabbling with his alter ego in the MCU for like 5 years now.
Really?
In case you don't know that, that's General Ross is the Red Hulk.
Oh.
In case anyone didn't know that, we're in spoiler territory, so it's fine.
Yeah.
But he's not looking good. William Hurt, he's not looking good.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. Maybe they're trying to maybe they're moving away from Red Hulk. It'll be
Maybe.
interesting to see how that happens. I quite enjoyed this scene in the Macau.
Yeah.
That's the whole sequence in Macau is probably my favorite in the entire movie from beginning to end. From trying to pick out the small things happening in the different smaller fight pits.
See the Black Widow and the extremist guy.
To Wong fighting Abomination, to them rigging the fight,
Yeah.
which is such a Wong thing to do.
That hurt. Let me show you how it feels.
It's like, oh shit, we need to work on you.
Yeah.
What do you say? What did he say about his punches? You have to work on you
Holding back
holding those punches a bit.
Yeah.
But the whole Macau scene was great.
And Macau is so stylish, like it just looks so cool.
It's Las Vegas on steroids.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like, people think Las Vegas is the most glitzy, glamorous place on Earth in terms of lights. Let me tell you right now, Las Vegas has nothing on Macau, and I think they really captured, especially those outside sequences of Macau. They did a really good job with their.
Is Macau a real city?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a real place.
I was just making
Yeah,
sure.
it's a real place. I think like 20 million people live there.
Yeah.
So
I
if you're
was pretty sure, but I was just like,
hey, that's fine.
Nope. Okay, 20 million people do not live in Macau. I apologize. Only 600,000.
I imagine it's about 20 million people counting tourists, but actually live there.
Macau is a real Macau. Yeah. Macau is a real gambling hub for.
Yeah.
I thought so. I'm not great with my Chinese geography.
So we also learn in this sequence that Zeeling taught herself to fight by observing the men training at Wenwu's compound. This is where they have that cage fight that we talked about, which is very stylish, well choreographed. It feels like that sibling fight. We've already talked about that. The 10 rings launch an attack on the fight club, which has that awesome action sequence on the bamboo scaffolding outside, which culminates in Death Dealer snagging the pendant and Shang-Chi and him fighting, and Shang-Chi's about to kill him, and Wenwu arrives and captures Shang-Chi, Katie, Zeeling, and the pendant.
Yeah, I don't think Shang-Chi was going to kill him. I have a feeling if he was going to, he was going to stab the ground next to him. I don't think Shang-Chi had reached that point yet. I think Wenwu didn't want to see if he did or didn't yet.
See, I have the opposite take. I feel like at that point in time, because the reason why I mentioned him earlier is because of the training that Death Dealer did to him, like with the whipping and everything. I feel like because he can't kill his father, I felt like he was ready to kill Death Dealer at that time.
Yeah.
But hey, you have a different take. That's totally fine.
Yeah, for me, I think the moment in the movie where he realized he could kill somebody was in that third act when he was talking with Katie at the river,
Mm.
and that's when But that's just a personal take.
Yeah, hey, you're more than welcome to your personal take. Anything anyone wants to add about Macau before we transition to the Ten Rings compound? We've already said quite a lot, but if you got something else, now's the time.
Aw. I don't got much more to add to Macau. It was well done.
Alright.
Also, quick question.
Yeah, what's up?
The guy with the blade, what's his name again?
Razorfest?
What's he from? Because I know he's from a past Marvel movie, isn't he?
Not that I'm aware of.
I thought he was. I remember them talking about someone other than Mandarin being in. But I could be wrong.
I know Trevor was, but not that I know of.
Okay.
I may have missed him somewhere. I thought he looked a bit like, and I still think he does, the guy who Red Guardian was arm wrestling. It isn't the same guy, but it looks like him.
Yeah.
But
I heard something about that, but it could be wrong.
He may have, but I didn't recognize him from anywhere else.
No.
So they are all taken to the Ten Rings compound, where we learn that Wenwu fell in love with the guardian of Ta Lo, Li, and the villagers rejected Wenwu, and Li chose him instead, and they left Ta Lo. And then one of my favorite sequences is, having found love, we get to see Wenwu living the life of like this happy father and husband. And I love that sequence so much. He abandons the Ten Rings, he locks them away, and he just is like
shut down his operations.
Yeah, and just like the smiling and the happiness. I love that sequence. Back into the present, Wenwu uses the pendants to reveal the map leading to Ta Lo. That's that water sequence you see in the trailer. Wenwu explains that he has heard Li calling to him and believes she is being held captive in Ta Lo behind a sealed gate. He plans to destroy the village unless they release her. His children object, and he imprisons them in Katie, where they find Trevor, who is also being imprisoned, and Morris. How did Morris... did they ever explain how Morris ended up there?
Yeah, Wang Wu brought him back from his earlier explorations into the forest.
Okay. So that's how Morris wound up there.
Yeah.
And Morris offers to guide them to Ta Lo. We get a cool car chase sequence. And this is, of course, where we see the flashback that when Shang-Chi was 7, his mother was murdered by Wenwu's enemies, who are called the Iron Gang. Wenwu then took up the Ten Rings once more and massacres the Iron Gang and resumes leadership of the organization. And that is that sequence we talked about, that dark sequence.
That brutal sequence. Absolutely brutal.
And it's told through the kid's eyes by focusing on him and just the reflection in the mirror. And it is so well done. Like, it gives you chills watching him just snap.
Yeah, you definitely see his father just
and even
lose it.
When you see Shang-Chi his father right after it happened, and he's like looking back at the boxes, like at the box of the ring, he looks dead inside. Like, he looks emotionally drained, and if you look carefully, hasn't been shaving or anything either.
Yeah.
And he just looks like
he's done with life. Done. You feel that grief.
Yeah.
Like, and you feel it. And it's that performance from Tony Leung is just incredible.
Yeah. Him saying the most chilling line was him saying that he found a reason to grow old.
Yeah.
Because it just really harkened at his humanity, and that like he
gave up immortality for this.
Yeah.
For this
life. For her.
Yeah.
But I was like, that's bad parenting manners for what he did to the kid.
Well, true, but it was a really powerful scene.
Oh, definitely. I'm not watching that scene.
Yeah, it's
it's such a good scene. It's chills.
Yeah.
So Morris, we have a great sequence of Trevor and the Planet of the Apes we talked about, and Morris leads them through a very well executed chase scene into Talo, which exists in that separate universe with the various Chinese mythological creatures, who all look pretty great. They meet Ying Nan, which is, of course, Michelle Yeoh's character, who explains the history of Talo. Now, here's where things start to get a little screwy. Thousands of years ago, the village was attacked by the soul-consuming Dweller in Darkness and its minions, but was saved by a Chinese dragon called the Great Protector, who helped seal the Dark Gate to the Dweller's world. According to Nan, the Dweller in Darkness has been influencing Wenwu to believe Li is still alive, so that he will open the gate and free him. Shang-Chi, Zeeling, and Katie join the village in training and preparing for Wenwu's arrival using outfits and weapons crafted from dragon scales. And then we have that sequence, which is my favorite acting from Simu Liu, where he's sitting by the river talking to Katie. Where it's revealed that he did go through with it.
He killed
the leader of the Iron Gang when he was 14 and then ran away to America. That is my favorite acting moment from Simu Liu. Just like when Wu's is the flashback scenes where he kills the other Iron Gang members, and then this one for Shang-Chi is just like, oh
the whole. So I have a lot of. The third act is where I have most of my problems with the movie. The Great Protector. The Great Protector should have just been named Fing Fang Foom.
That's fair.
Because for those of you who don't know, Fing Fang Foom is a Marvel character that is a dragon, more specifically, a Chinese dragon.
True.
It is the perfect way
to use them.
Bring them into the moon, it's right there! But, okay, fine, they went with the Great Protector. Sure.
Do they have the rights for Fing Fang Foom?
At this point, I don't know.
Yeah, who knows anymore? But I would just that might be a reason.
Right. Disney should just buy everything.
I mean, they bought whole studios to get one person, so I don't know if it really matters if they... But... So that's one thing. I was like, okay, they should have been... They could get all these other characters. They could have gotten Fing Fang Foom.
Yeah, I can't imagine any of their competitors are waiting to do a Fing Fang Foom movie.
Right? And I honestly think the whole... Well, I guess we haven't touched on it yet, but like that whole last fight... Yeah, that whole last fight shouldn't have even happened.
It really drove me out of the movie.
It didn't have to happen.
It brought the score down for me because it just went from this tied down family problem to a kaiju battle.
Yes, the
kaiju so before we go more into it, because I know we haven't technically touched on it, but does anybody actually have like a real big opinion on the third act up until now, or do we just want to jump to this?
Well, all I'm gonna say is up until the kaiju fight, I was really looking forward to seeing how it was gonna end.
Agreed.
Like, there is a huge mistake that I'm about to touch on that the movie made. So let's get right up to the kaiju fight before we rip into it. Wenwu and the Ten Rings arrive and attack Talo. Wenwu overpowers Shang-Chi and forces him into a nearby lake, then attacks the gates with the rings. That's that cool sequence where he puts them all on one hand.
Falcon punches them into the ocean.
Yeah. This allows some of the Dweller's soul-sucking minions to escape, where they kill Death Dealer. There's a reason why I keep mentioning him. Just stay tuned a little bit longer, and you'll see why.
The Boba Fett of Shang-Chi.
Pretty much, but just wait till you hear my final verdict on the character. And the Ten Rings, led by Razorfest, because Wenwu's not with them, he's across the lake, joins the Guardians of Talo to fight said minions. And then, so Shang-Chi is then brought back up by the Great Protector, who leaves the lake to battle the minions. This is where the first problem gets to start, is if I feel like it wouldn't have been that bad if they just had him fighting the minions. It's still slipping from what it should have been, but it could have been okay. But then we get what should have been the final fight of the film, Wenwu and Shang-Chi's fight, which was gorgeous and well choreographed, and Shang-Chi gains the upper hand, chooses to spare Wenwu, And now here's where things kind of hit the fan. The Dweller in Darkness escapes the weakened gate and attacks Shang-Chi. Wenwu saves him, bequeathing the rings to him before being killed by the Dweller in Darkness. Screw you, Dweller in Darkness. The movie should not have killed Wenwu off. Fire away, rip the kaiju fight apart.
The fight shouldn't have happened.
I agree.
No.
Like the guy in darkness, the big black dragon that whole thing should not have happened, because the whole premise of the movie was a build-up of Shang-Chi
And his
and
father.
his father.
Yeah. And then there's still like 20 minutes left in the movie.
It is a
gone.
build-up of proportions equal to, and I might get flack for this, and I don't care, because I'm a huge Star Wars fan still. It has the same build-up to Darth Vader versus Luke Skywalker in An Empire Strikes Back. Now imagine that fight between Luke and Vader happens, and then immediately after, Luke and the Millennium Falcon fights a giant space dragon.
It undercuts the whole thing.
It undercuts the entire emotional impact of the movie.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The Great Protector, seeing the dragon, we saw the dragon in the trailer.
Yeah, we knew it was coming.
Yeah, but it didn't have to be this CGI monstrosity of a film.
No.
And I think if they didn't have to use so much of their budget on this
Kaiju thing.
The kaiju fight. Yep.
Kaiju fight, flying kaiju fight. It would have been a whole lot better. The fight, the concluding fight should have just been between him and his dad.
100%.
One of the best scenes is when he throws his son into the ground and releases all 10 rings. And there's this dust cloud of smoke that's hindering vision. And Shang-Chi just walks out of it like the frickin' Avatar with all 10 rings just rotating around him in orange. And then he goes to Kamehameha his dad. That scene was so good.
Yeah.
And then they ruined it.
Yeah.
This whole, if they didn't have the whole kaiju fight, I would have liked the movie better.
Yeah.
But seeing how high the reviews were for the movie and that ending, I was like,
it undercut the whole movie.
I feel like these reviews are a little too high for this movie. That
Also, okay, Katie used the bow for 2 days.
Yeah, and is able to fire it that far and that high.
Obviously, could have been a lucky shot.
True.
And they did make some, notice of maybe she had natural talent for this.
But it
still.
Katie at the end of the movie felt odd.
How they treated some of the background characters and how they died off was a travesty.
Yeah.
Death Dealer is one of them.
Yeah. At least Razorfest survived. That was actually surprising that he did.
He was actually supposed to die.
Yeah, I saw the deleted scene where he did.
Now there is in this third act there is one fantastic scene between one of the village elders and Wenwu.
I know what you're talking about.
And the English subtitles destroyed the emotional impact of what Wenwu actually said.
Really?
So there is a scene where Wenwu and this elder are talking. And I guess Wenwu got the feeling that the village elder disrespected him.
Yeah, I don't see what you're talking about.
Yeah, so he said, the exact quote was, at least in the English subtitle, was,
"I live. Speak to me. I've lived 10 of your lifetimes.
1,000 of your lifetimes," or something like that, or 100 of your lifetimes. It was something ridiculous number, right? Where it's just be careful how you speak to me, young man. I've lived 100 of your lifetimes. Which I thought, that's a pretty clever line.
Yeah, I like that line.
Until you find out what the direct translation is from Chinese to English, and I wish they used it instead.
What did he say?
It was, "Be careful how you speak to me, young man. I've eaten more salt than you've eaten rice." Which just shows how much older he is. Because for someone to eat more salt than Asian culture consumes rice
Yeah.
shows just how much older he is.
He says,
clever.
"I've lived 10 of your lifetimes."
Yeah,
10
because
of
it's
your
about
lifetime.
1,000 years, about 100 years times 10.
Yeah, so he's like, "Be careful how you speak to me. I've lived 10 of young man. I've lived 10 of your lifetimes."
That's
But in
just-
China, in the Chinese direct translation, it's, "Be careful how you speak to me. I've eaten more salt than you have rice."
That's amazing.
And I'm just like, that should have been the movie.
That's good. The one thing I will defend the kaiju fight about, and it's such a minor thing, is at least the kaiju didn't look terrible. They didn't look amazing, but they didn't look terrible.
No.
That's all I can say in the positive. It shouldn't have happened. But at least they didn't look terrible. With all the budget going to that.
They didn't look good.
No, they didn't look great. They did not look great, but they didn't look terrible.
See, this is where I'm starting to notice a problem with Marvel movies, is they're putting budgets in wrong spots where they should not focus so much on, or they put in cheesy CGI that does not.
And in correlation with that, it's like the worst part of this movie was the most Marvel-esque part of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, they put in, like, you could tell they put in that big dragon fight because Marvel. But you don't need it sometimes.
Yeah. I feel like Wenwu versus Shang-Chi is where the movie should have ended, and killing off Wenwu, I think, was a mistake.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not just because he's my favorite. I legitimately think that
it could have been like
interesting if he was still alive.
Because it could have been like an honor thing where you have beaten me in battle, and you are my son. I'll now pass on this to you.
It would be interesting.
And then, he could have turned into a good guy and actually used his resources or everything he had to help out his son. Because he had earned that respect.
Yeah.
But instead just died.
Yeah. The movie wraps up after Katie kills the Dweller in Darkness. Shang-Chi and Katie...
Did she, though? She didn't kill him.
Shang-Chi shoved a bunch of rings.
Shang-Chi nuked him from orbit.
That's true.
Shang-Chi, or Katie just saved, the Great
Protector. Yeah, that's true. I misspoke.
The Great Protector that couldn't protect her crap, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. So then
but
Katie...
hey, who am I to judge?
Could you do better? Katie and Shang-Chi return to San Francisco, where they're summoned by the Sorcerer Wong to Kamartage. Now let's talk a bit about the credit scenes and Wong, because I found very interesting, is how Wong is kind of like the new Nick Fury going forward, which I am excited about, because Wong is great.
Yeah.
So in our mid-credit scene, we see Wong introducing Shang-Chi and Katie to Bruce Banner, who is not Professor Hulk. It is legitimately Banner, and Carol Danvers, while researching the ring's origin. They discover the 10 rings are acting as a beacon to something. And then the post-credit scenes, Jia Ling, Shang-Chi's sister, becomes the new leader of the 10 Rings organization with Razorfest at her side, despite telling Shang-Chi that she was going to disband their father's operations. Let's talk
obvious plot twist was obvious with sister. Like as soon as it revealed that she was hosting an underground fight club on the dark web, I'm just like, yeah, she ain't gonna be good.
Yeah. So let's talk about the implications of the MCU. We've got Wong working with Abomination, and Wong recruiting Shang-Chi and Katie. We've got Banner, not Professor Hulk. So what do you guys think's going on? Like, obviously, I get the feeling Wong is Nick Furying things right now and trying to rebuild the hole left by the Avengers who are gone, because the Earth needs new protectors. What do you guys think's happened with Banner?
I think Banner and Hulk have split.
It's two separate individuals?
Yep.
Interesting. Didn't they do that in the comics?
That's why his arm's not healed.
Didn't they do that in the comics?
Yep.
Interesting.
And I think that's the comic line that they're taking.
Interesting. Nick, any takes on that?
I don't know for sure what they're doing for Banner, but do we know how long that after Endgame this scene took place?
Well, we know the movie takes place before Far From Home.
No.
I think it's just a couple months after Endgame.
Okay.
But we also know, thanks to the little sizzle reel, that She-Hulk takes place with Professor Hulk instead of Banner. So that kind of gives an idea of the timeline of that too. Whatever's going to happen in that show, Shang-Chi happens. I did it now. Shang-Chi happens afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna see him split in
That's interesting. Yeah.
She-Hulk.
I
think they tried it, and I think they thought that Professor Hulk didn't work.
Yeah, that didn't have very positive reactions at all.
There's just a lot of things that I'm scared about in the upcoming MCU. I thought, like, when they were first talking about, like, the Great Devourer or whatever the Black Dragon was, especially when you look at the shows as a whole, with especially WandaVision, I really thought maybe they're gonna do a Mephisto play.
I think everybody thought that
Mephisto play is coming.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. There's just a lot of things I was just like, I don't know how this will work, but we'll have to see.
Yeah. I think one of the big things the MCU is facing right now is the timeline of how movies are releasing. Yeah. Because they had that original timeline, then COVID hit, and then for some reason they moved around. So everyone's kind of confused when things are taking place and what things haven't happened.
Yeah. All right, let's we're now way past the Eternals runtime here, so let's wrap this up with our favorite and least favorite scene and our overall rating. Special guest star Iron, why don't you start us off?
All right.
Actually, did we ever get your least favorite character?
My least favorite character is I had to like cement it. I think it's the sister.
Zeeling.
Yeah, Jingling. I think it's her.
And Nick, what was your favorite least favorite? I don't think you commented on either.
Least favorite would it'd probably be the sister as well.
Okay.
And then favorite, it was between either Shang-Chi or the Bond.
Okay.
She said Shang instead of Shang-Chi, so we've all done it.
Yeah.
We all did it now.
We've all done it once. So what was your favorite, and then your... should we do favorite, least favorite, or go favorites around, then least favorites around?
Let's do favorites around. You start.
All right, I start. Everything with Wenwu, but if I had to pick one, it's that final fight with Shang-Chi up until the bad ending that shouldn't have happened. But just from what I was talking about earlier, from that bit in the temple all the way to the other side, that whole bit with Wenwu
on the field across the lake,
and... starting with the "Watch how you speak to me, young man," like that whole is so good. Iron, what is your favorite?
My favorite scene might surprise people. My favorite scene was when it's actually at the compound, and it is when they start talking about names and his name, but also what his name meant, and he goes into his backstory about like just that whole sit down conversation where we got to learn a lot about Wenwu as a character. I think was just a fantastic scene. That's my favorite scene.
Did you get Empire Strikes Back vibes at the start of that dining scene with Vader?
I just got Empire Strikes Back vibes from the entire movie. And I'm like, that's not a bad thing when you're talking about this is going to be a good movie.
Nick, what is your favorite scene?
It has to... My favorite scene is when Wenwu takes Shang-Chi to the place, and then he just wrecks everyone there after his mom.
It's such a chilling scene.
So impactful.
Yeah.
Because you see him broken from what he's lost and take revenge, and you see it.
Yeah, you see a broken man with power.
Yeah, and then his line of like to Shang-Chi, I don't remember the exact quote, but when he's like, you must like,
you must reap blood.
Blood must be repaid with blood.
Blood debts must be repaid with blood.
That's the one. Yeah, that's so. Say that to a kid. My least favorite scene, and it's the reason why I've mentioned him so much. Death Dealer's death scene is so abrupt and sudden. He was such a big part of the marketing, the toys. He had a cool design, and he Boba Fetted. He didn't do much, and he died. And he had such a good look. It was a waste of a really cool design. So that is my least favorite scene. It might be a bit of a nitpick, but he had such a cool look to him, and he amounted to nothing.
We never even. The first time I learned his name is when you were talking about him. I had to piece together who you were talking about.
Yeah, they don't say his name. He has no dialogue, nothing. Like, he's got cool fight sequences.
But you think he's gonna have some impact on the story because of
he's the
him
right hand of Wenwu.
basically beating his son growing up.
Yeah. But yeah, that's my least favorite. Cam?
My least favorite is the entire thing after the gate opens. And then the Black Dragon comes out. It's just so unnecessary. And it's just didn't need to happen. But it did.
Nick?
I'm gonna have to agree with Cam. Again, if it wasn't for that scene, I would have a lot higher praise for the movie. But because they just ruined it at the end for me. Because it's like, you're not expecting, you're like, oh, it's a father, son, it's the powers of, all that going into it. And then, here's a dragon, here's a monster that can suck your soul, and here we go. And I just went, what am I watching? And it just...
And you have to use dragon scale weapons, and then these two sides that went from killing each other just went to immediate allies that knew how to fight together.
I did not, it ruined it for me.
There were a couple times in the movie that took me out of it, like so in the opening monologue, when we see Wenwu going through the forest, there was 3 jeeps, and then suddenly when they're like, the forest is moving, there's only 1 jeep.
Yeah.
But his jeep would most likely be in the middle because it's him.
Yeah, you would put him in the middle.
What happened to the other jeeps? They just forgot about them. They just disappeared. So, I mean, when it comes to overall rating, when I first saw it in theaters and I walked out of it with my wife after seeing it, I gave it a 9. Upon rewatching it a few times,
100-point scale.
100, so 90. Because 10 is just multiplied by 10, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So a 90 out of 100 when I first time I saw it. Second time I saw it and third time, I gotta bump it down to an 80. That last half of the third act is just...
Okay. Nick, your final rating?
No, I give it around an 82, maybe a bit lower.
Well, it's time to come up with your rating.
A 77.
77.
Solid.
And my rating is an 89%. The kaiju fight shouldn't have happened, but I love Wenwu more than I hate that scene. And this is pretty much the only time we're gonna get him, but the impact he left on me is legitimate and strong, and that's
Marvel, please do more villains like Wenwu.
Or just find a way to use Wenwu more. I don't care what it takes. I will yada yada a resurrection plot if you want, just to get more
Lazarus Pit! Isn't that DC? Doesn't matter.
Just go for it. It's fine. It's Marvel. People are resurrecting all the time.
This movie I got huge Empire Strikes Back vibes, but also DC Batman vibes when it came to the League of Assassins and Damian Wayne. I got huge vibes of these from them. So if that's the type of movie we're comparing it to, it's an A movie for me. It's just sour taste in my mouth is left after that last fight.
All right. So that will wrap up our review of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in again. Thank you, Iron, for guest starring on the show. It's a pleasure to have you. Hope you are willing to come back for some more when you see one you want to be a part of.
Absolutely. If you whenever you're going to talk about Dune, I will be here.
Yeah.
As for Jerryofdom and myself, we will be back at you in 2 weeks with our review of Spider-Man 2, the original one with Tobey Maguire and Alfred Molina, getting ready for No Way Home, which will be 2 weeks after that, so you have that to look forward to as well.
You're
Thank
not going to
you.
review Spider-Man 3?
2 is my favorite, and I want to rewatch it for No Way Home because Alfred Molina.
3's my favorite, surprisingly. It's like a
That's not
childhood
surprising.
movie
It's
to me.
you and your cousins. That's not surprising. So thank you again, everybody, so much for tuning in. Don't forget to check out the Gmod Squad, our affiliate channel, and we will see you all next time. Enjoy the movies, everybody.
Peace.